They stared at her scars like trophies they didn't earn. The break room fell into a hush the moment Sarah Mitchell stepped inside. 42, battle-worn. Her burn scars curled down her cheek like ghost trails of another life. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not at the elite training academy. Not with men half her age. Not eating alone every day like a ghost with a badge. Captain Derek Walsh leaned back in his chair, voice slick with mockery. "Hey, Sarah, fire drill again?" Laughter erupted. She didn't blink, didn't bite, didn't need to. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew, was why Tomand brought her back after all these years, and why she was smiling when they laughed. Want to uncover the hidden truth behind her scars? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from, here on Graceful Valor Stories. "Looks like someone got too close to the grill," Walsh murmured, loud enough for his audience, but pitched to carry across the room. He traced a finger along his own unblemished cheek, mimicking the path of her scars while his companions chuckled. Sarah's hands trembled slightly around her sandwich, but she kept her gaze fixed on her plate. The laughter grew bolder, feeding on her silence like flames on dry wood. One by one, she set down her food, gathered her things with deliberate care, and walked from the room with measured steps. Not a single word passed her lips, but something in her bearing, something indefinable yet profound, made the youngest instructor's laughter die in his throat. The narrator's voice carries a weight of knowing as the scene fades. But sometimes the quietest among us carry the loudest thunder. What would you do if your deepest sacrifices became the target of cruel mockery? Drop a comment below. We read every single one. Ever wonder what secrets a woman like Sarah might hold? Stick with us. The revelation will shock you, here on Graceful Valor Stories. Sarah Mitchell's story began not in that sterile break room, but on the windswept plains of rural Montana, where poverty shaped character and hardship forged determination. At 18, she'd traded the endless horizons of her childhood for the structured promise of military service, seeking escape from a future written in food stamps and foreclosure notices. The Army offered more than a paycheck. It offered purpose. Through 15 years of service, she'd risen through ranks that seemed designed to reject her, facing down discrimination with the same quiet intensity she brought to every mission. Her call sign, Widow 27, hadn't been chosen for drama, but earned through precision. 27 confirmed high-value targets eliminated across a career that spanned continents and conflicts most Americans would never hear about. The scars came later, in the Afghan mountains during what should have been her final deployment. An IED, improvised explosive device, had torn through her convoy on a dusty road outside Kandahar in 2019. The explosion killed her entire unit instantly. 6 souls vanished in a thunderclap of hate and shrapnel. Sarah alone survived, pulled from the burning wreckage with half her face melted and her heart carrying a weight no metal could balance. Among the dead was Marcus Chen, her fiancé and fellow operator, whose ring she still wore on a chain beneath her simple instructor's polo shirt. The official report called it a miracle she lived. Sarah called it a curse, especially during the endless nights when she could still hear Marcus calling her name through the flames. Retirement hadn't been a choice so much as a surrender. The woman who'd once coordinated strikes across 3 time zones now taught basic marksmanship to fresh recruits at a stateside training facility. She'd deliberately chosen obscurity, burying her medals in a storage unit and scrubbing her social media presence clean. Her apartment reflected this new life, sparse, functional, containing nothing that suggested the legend she'd been. A 10-year-old pickup truck carried her to work each morning where she demonstrated proper stance and breathing techniques to kids who'd never seen real combat. She kept her instruction basic, almost mundane, never hinting at the muscle memory that could put rounds through a dime at 500 yards. But the only telltale sign of her past resided on her right wrist, a small tattoo reading XXV in simple Roman numerals. She'd gotten it in Germany after her 20th confirmed kill, back when she'd still believed the numbers mattered more than the faces. Now, it served as a reminder and a warning, though none of her colleagues understood its significance. Her philosophy had crystallized through loss. Real strength doesn't need an audience. She lived it daily, maintaining perfect shooting scores during quarterly evaluations while deliberately underplaying her abilities. When other instructors boasted about their deployments, she remained silent. When they compared scars and stories, she excused herself. The Sarah Mitchell, who'd once been the deadliest woman in special operations, had chosen to disappear, leaving only a quiet instructor who ate alone and drove home to an empty apartment where 6 ghosts waited. By week 2, the mockery had become routine. Captain Walsh had transformed Sarah's presence into his personal entertainment, crafting new variations on cruelty with the dedication of an artist. Scarface became the tamest of the nicknames. Crispy and Half-Face followed, each delivered with the casual malice of someone who'd never felt real pain. His followers, a rotating cast of junior instructors eager to climb the social ladder, amplified each joke with their laughter. During staff meetings, Walsh questioned her qualifications with false concern. "Are we sure she's psychologically fit to handle weapons?" he'd ask, tapping his own unmarked temple. Trauma can leave lasting damage after all. The implication hung heavy. Whatever accident had scarred her face had surely scarred her mind as well. The system that should have protected Sarah instead sheltered her tormentors. Walsh's father, a retired colonel with Pentagon connections, cast a long shadow over the academy's administration. Complaints vanished into bureaucratic black holes while funding flowed freely. Sarah's direct supervisor, Major Peterson, took her aside after she'd filed her second harassment report. "Look, Mitchell," he'd said, not quite meeting her eyes. "You need to keep your head down. This is military culture. Thick skin is part of the job description." The HR department proved equally useless, dismissing her concerns as personality conflicts and reminding her that instructors need to maintain unit cohesion. The message was clear: endure or leave. Small details began to betray the truth Sarah worked so hard to hide. Sergeant Major James Parker, the Academy's oldest instructor and a Vietnam veteran with his own collection of scars, noticed the way she moved through doorways, always checking corners, never presenting her back to open space. Her shooting demonstrations remained flawlessly basic, but Parker caught the micro-adjustments she made between shots, the kind of corrections that came from muscle memory earned in firefights, not on training ranges. During lectures, tactical terminology would slip through her carefully maintained civilian facade. She'd say target acquisition instead of aiming, or reference fields of fire before catching herself and simplifying. Students began to sense something different about the quiet instructor with the scarred face, a competence that transcended her modest position. The breaking point arrived disguised as another prank. Walsh's group had acquired firecrackers, small ones, the kind teenagers might throw on the 4th of July. They waited until Sarah walked past their position near the armory, then lit and tossed them behind her. The sharp crack of miniature explosions sent her diving for cover behind a concrete barrier, her body moving with the fluid grace of long practice. For 3 seconds, she wasn't in Georgia, but back in Kandahar, the IED's roar replacing the firecrackers' pop. When reality reasserted itself, she found herself crouched in a textbook defensive position, hands reaching for a weapon that wasn't there, while Walsh's group laughed themselves breathless. That night, alone in her apartment, Sarah stared at the photograph she kept hidden in her nightstand drawer. 6 faces smiled back at her. Alpha Team, taken 2 days before the explosion. Marcus stood beside her, his arm draped casually over her shoulders, unaware that within 48 hours he'd be gone. Rodriguez, Thompson, Way, Kowalski, and Barnes completed the group, each grinning with the invincibility of elite soldiers who'd survived 100 close calls. She traced their faces with one scarred finger, remembering their voices, their jokes, the way Barnes always hummed off-key during long reconnaissance missions. The empty apartment echoed with their absence. She pulled out a cardboard box, began packing her few belongings. Maybe it was time to disappear completely, find some small town where no one would look twice at a scarred woman who kept to herself. Morning brought an unexpected development in the form of General Patricia Harrison's surprise inspection. At 58, Harrison carried herself with the bearing of someone who'd earned every star on her uniform through combat leadership, not political maneuvering. Her gray eyes swept the assembled instructors with the calculating gaze of a predator identifying prey and threats. When those eyes found Sarah standing at attention in the back row, they lingered. Something shifted in Harrison's expression, recognition dawning like sunrise over a battlefield. Throughout the standard inspection procedures, Harrison's attention kept returning to the scarred instructor, who held herself with a stillness that spoke of hard-won discipline. The demonstration portion of the inspection called for each instructor to showcase their teaching methods. Sarah stepped forward when her turn came, intending to run through her standard basic marksmanship routine. But as she handled the weapon, checking its action with practiced ease, 20 years of muscle memory betrayed her. Her stance shifted subtly, weight distributed for rapid movement rather than static accuracy. When she fired, the grouping was impossibly tight. Not the competent clustering of a basic instructor, but the surgical precision of someone who'd made such shots when lives hung in the balance. Harrison stepped closer during the ceasefire, and as Sarah lowered the weapon, the general's eyes locked on to the small tattoo visible on her wrist, 27 in Roman numerals. Text. "Instructor Mitchell," Harrison said quietly, "a word in private, please." They stepped away from the group, Walsh watching with barely concealed irritation at the attention being paid to his favorite target. Once out of earshot, Harrison's professional mask dropped, replaced by something approaching awe. "Widow 27, she breathed. "I've been looking for you for 2 years." Sarah's spine stiffened, but she said nothing. Harrison continued, her voice urgent with suppressed emotion. "The Pentagon listed you as killed in action after the Kandahar incident. We've been trying to award you the Medal of Honor posthumously. The intelligence from your operations saved 3 cities from coordinated attacks. Conservative estimates put the lives saved at over 1,200 Americans." Sarah's response came out barely above a whisper. "I'm just a basic firearms instructor, General. You must have me confused with someone else." But Harrison wasn't deterred. She'd studied every after-action report, memorized the operational history of the most lethal female operator in Special Forces history. "The scars on your face," Harrison said gently, "they didn't come from an accident, did they? You went back into the fire to pull out those wounded civilians after the IED hit. Even with half your face burned, you provided covering fire for the medevac. 3 children lived because of you." The moment of reckoning arrived with Harrison's next words. "I want you to show these instructors what real marksmanship looks like," the general said, loud enough for the assembled group to hear. Walsh immediately stepped forward, his voice dripping with false concern. "General Harrison, with all due respect, Instructor Mitchell is just a basic firearms teacher. Perhaps one of our advanced combat instructors would be more—" Harrison's gaze could have frozen hellfire. "Captain Walsh, you're about to learn something. Stand down." She turned back to Sarah, her voice gentler but no less commanding. "I know you've chosen to stay hidden, but your teammates, Chen, Rodriguez, Thompson, Kowalski, Barnes, they died believing their sacrifice meant something. Honor them. Show these people who you really are." Sarah stood perfectly still for 10 heartbeats, each second stretching like an eternity around them. And the other instructors shifted nervously, sensing the weight of something momentous. Finally, Sarah nodded once, a minute movement that somehow conveyed both resignation and resolution. She walked back to the range with a different gait, the prowling stride of a predator that no longer needed to hide its nature. As she selected a rifle from the rack, her entire demeanor transformed. The hunched shoulders straightened, the apologetic air evaporated. What remained was pure, lethal competence distilled into human form. What followed would be whispered about in military circles for years. Sarah began with the standard targets at standard ranges. Her shots so perfectly centered they created a single ragged hole. Then she moved to distances that made Walsh's followers exchange uncertain glances. 300 yards, 400, 500. At each distance, the shots remained impossibly precise, aimed not just at center mass, but at specific points that would instantly neutralize a threat. She switched to moving targets, tracking and eliminating each with an economy of motion that spoke of countless real-world engagements. The rifle seemed an extension of her will, responding to adjustments so subtle most observers couldn't even detect them. For the finale, Harrison had the rangemaster set up a scenario that wasn't in any training manual. Multiple targets at varying distances, some partially obscured, others moving at different speeds. It was the kind of complex engagement that would challenge a full fire team. Sarah completed it alone in under 90 seconds, every target neutralized with a single shot. As the last brass casing hit the ground, she safed the weapon and turned to face her audience. When she reached the safe, the weapon was locked. The silence was complete, broken only by the distant sound of wind through Georgia pines. Walsh's face had drained of all color, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a landed fish. General Harrison stepped forward, addressing the assembled instructors with a voice that carried the weight of command. Instructors, allow me to properly introduce Sarah Mitchell, operational call sign Widow 27. 27 confirmed high-value targets eliminated over 15 years of Tier 1 special operations. Her intelligence work prevented 3 coordinated attacks on American cities. The conservative estimate is 1,200 American lives saved, though the real number is likely much higher. She paused, letting the words sink in. Those scars you've been mocking, she earned them pulling 3 Afghan children from a burning vehicle while under enemy fire after an IED killed her entire team. She suffered third-degree burns over 30% of her body and still provided covering fire for the medical evacuation that saved those children's lives. The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Several instructors who'd participated in Walsh's mockery looked physically ill. The captain himself seemed to have shrunk, his privileged bearing crumbling under the weight of his catastrophic misjudgment. Harrison continued, her tone shifting from informational to condemning. This woman has sacrificed more for her country than most of you can imagine. She's earned the right to be treated with dignity and respect, not subjected to juvenile harassment by people who've never heard a shot fired in anger. Her gaze fixed on Walsh with laser intensity. Captain, I'll be having a conversation with your father about your conduct. I suspect your time as an instructor here is coming to an end, but... Sarah's response would surprise everyone. Instead of basking in vindication or seeking further retribution, Sarah simply nodded to General Harrison and began walking toward the exit. Walsh, panic overtaking his usual arrogance, stumbled forward with a stream of apologies. Instructor Mitchell, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known... Sarah stopped, but didn't turn around. When she spoke, her voice carried no anger, only a tired wisdom. Actions speak louder than words, Captain. They always have. She continued walking, leaving Walsh standing alone in the middle of the range, his carefully constructed world in ruins around him. Harrison caught up with Sarah in the parking lot, where the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the asphalt. I'm prepared to offer you the position of Advanced Combat Training Director, the general said without preamble. Full pension restoration, back pay for the years since your medical retirement, and the Medal of Honor ceremony you've earned. Sarah leaned against her battered pickup truck, finally allowing exhaustion to show on her scarred features. With respect, General, I'm not ready to be a symbol. I came here to teach basics to kids who might need those skills someday. That's all I want. Harrison studied her for a long moment, then smiled with understanding. What if we compromise? You keep teaching basics, but I send you the students who deserve to learn from the best. No publicity, no ceremonies, just you doing what you do best, creating warriors who might survive their first real fight. Sarah considered the offer, her gaze distant as she weighed the proposal against her need for anonymity. Finally, she nodded. Send me the ones who are here for the right reasons, General, not the glory seekers or the political climbers. Send me the ones who understand that coming home alive is the only victory that matters. Harrison extended her hand, and Sarah shook it firmly. You'll have them, the general promised. And Walsh, Sarah's expression didn't change. He's already punished himself more than any official sanction could, living with the knowledge of what he's done. That's a weight he'll carry forever. Harrison's respect for the scarred woman deepened further. Even now, after everything, she chose wisdom over vengeance. Within 48 hours, the academy underwent a quiet transformation. Walsh's transfer to a desk position at a supply depot happened so swiftly that most instructors arrived Monday morning to find his office already cleared out. No official announcement was made, but everyone understood. The culture of casual cruelty he'd cultivated withered without its ringleader. Other instructors found themselves examining their own behavior, wondering what unseen sacrifices might lie behind the quiet facades of their colleagues. Sarah returned to her basic firearms classes, but now she taught to rooms filled with attentive silence. Students who'd previously dismissed her as just another range instructor now hung on every word, searching for the wisdom hidden in her simple lessons. The real changes manifested in small ways. Sarah began incorporating subtle tactical concepts into her basic curriculum. Nothing that would reveal her background to casual observers, but enough to give her students genuine survival advantages. When a young female recruit struggled with the weight of her rifle, Sarah adjusted her stance with gentle hands, murmuring, "Leverage over strength always." She started sharing fragments of hard-won knowledge disguised as basic safety tips. "Always know your exits" became a mantra in her classroom, though few understood she meant it for more than fire drills. Students began seeking her out after hours, drawn by something indefinable in her teaching. She never turned anyone away who came with genuine questions. 3 weeks after the revelation, Sarah stood before a mixed group of instructors and advanced students for her first formal speaking engagement since the incident. She'd resisted Harrison's request to address the academy, but the general had been persuasive. "They need to hear from you," Harrison had said. "Not Widow 27, just Sarah Mitchell, instructor." Now facing the assembled crowd, Sarah spoke without notes, her scarred face calm in the afternoon light. "We're here to build warriors, not break spirits," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "Every person who walks through these doors has chosen to serve, to put themselves between danger and those they protect. That choice deserves respect, regardless of rank, background, or appearance." She paused, seeming to gather herself before continuing. "I lost my team in Afghanistan. 6 of the finest soldiers I've ever known, gone in an instant. They died believing their sacrifice would mean something, that the people they protected would carry on their mission. When we mock each other, when we tear down instead of build up, we dishonor their memory, and every soldier who's made that ultimate sacrifice." For the first time, she allowed emotion to color her words. Strength isn't about domination or humiliation. Real strength is lifting others up, ensuring the soldier beside you makes it home. Everything else is just noise. She shared one story, just one, about Marcus Chen, how he'd always insisted on checking everyone else's gear before his own. "He saved lives with that habit," she said simply. "Maybe one day, the habits you build here will do the same." General Harrison found Sarah after the speech carrying a small wooden box. "I know you said no ceremonies," Harrison began, "but this isn't for the public. It's just for you." Inside the box lay a commendation bar representing her entire unit, their names engraved on a simple silver plate. Sarah's fingers trembled as she lifted it, the weight negligible compared to its meaning. "They put your name on it too," Harrison said softly. "The 7 of you are listed together the way it should be." Sarah clutched the box to her chest, unable to speak. That night, in her Spartan apartment, she placed the commendation in a simple frame, not for display, but as a private memorial. The photograph of Alpha Team sat beside it, 7 smiles frozen in time. Over the following months, Sarah's influence spread through the academy like ripples on still water. Her students consistently scored highest on practical evaluations, displaying a tactical awareness that went beyond their basic training. Other instructors began adopting her methods, emphasis on situational awareness, respect for every member of the team, and the quiet confidence that came from genuine competence rather than bravado. The Academy's director, initially skeptical of the changes, noticed dropout rates plummeting while performance metrics soared. He offered Sarah a promotion 3 times. 3 times she politely declined, content with her role as a basic instructor who happened to produce exceptional students. Harrison made one final attempt to convince Sarah to accept a position at the Pentagon.
She painted a picture of influence and impact. Sarah could shape military training doctrine, ensure future soldiers received the best possible preparation, book deals, speaking tours, the chance to share her story with the world. Sarah listened patiently, then smiled with gentle finality. "My war is over, General. My service continues here, one student at a time." Real heroes don't need headlines. They need to know that someone who's been where they're going cared enough to prepare them properly. Harrison accepted the refusal with grace, understanding that Sarah Mitchell had found her peace and anonymity and purpose in simplicity. The season turned, bringing crisp autumn air to Georgia as Sarah continued her quiet work. Each morning she arrived at the range before dawn, using the solitude to maintain her own skills in private. These sessions weren't about maintaining the legendary precision of Widow 27, but about honoring the muscle memory that had kept her alive through 15 years of operations. As the sun rose, students would begin arriving, and she would transform back into the unassuming basic instructor who happened to possess an uncanny ability to diagnose and correct shooting problems with minimal words and maximum effect. One particular morning brought a young female recruit named Anna Reeves, 19 years old, with the gangly uncertainty of someone still growing into their adult frame. She struggled with the rifle's weight, her shots scattered across the target in a pattern that spoke of effort without understanding. Sarah watched for several attempts before approaching. "You're fighting the weapon," she observed quietly. "It's not your enemy. Think of it as an extension of your intent." She adjusted Anna's stance with gentle precision, repositioning her hands and shoulders. "Remember, strength isn't about being seen, it's about being ready." The next shot hit center mass. Anna's face lit up with surprise and pride, and Sarah allowed herself a smile in return. As the months passed, stories began to circulate in military circles about the scarred instructor at the Georgia Academy who could turn raw recruits into competent marksmen with seemingly effortless skill. Officers from other training facilities requested transfers for their struggling students. Sarah accepted them all with the same quiet professionalism, never acknowledging the growing reputation that preceded her. She developed a network of former students who stayed in touch, sending brief emails from deployments around the world. "Your voice was in my head during that firefight," one wrote. "Leverage over strength. Made it home because of that." She kept every message in a folder labeled simply Purpose. The Academy's transformation was complete by the one-year anniversary of Harrison's inspection. What had once been a culture of casual cruelty and hollow bravado had evolved into something more substantive. Instructors competed not through mockery, but through the success of their students. The mess hall conversations shifted from war stories to teaching techniques. Even the most senior instructors found themselves observing Sarah's classes, taking notes on her method. She never acknowledged this attention, maintaining the same steady presence that had carried her through both combat and its aftermath. Her scars, once a source of mockery, had become a silent reminder that survival itself was an achievement worthy of respect. On quiet evenings, Sarah would sometimes find herself in conversation with Sergeant Major Parker, the Vietnam veteran who'd first recognized the warrior beneath her unassuming exterior. They would sit outside the range as sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, sharing the comfortable silence of those who'd seen too much to require constant words. "You've changed this place," Parker observed one evening. Sarah shook her head slightly. "Places don't change, people do. I just reminded them why they're here." Parker smiled at that, recognizing the deflection of someone uncomfortable with praise. "Chen would be proud," he said softly, having learned the names of her lost team through patient observation. Sarah's hand unconsciously touched the chain at her throat where Marcus's ring rested. "They all would be," she agreed. The final scene crystallized on an afternoon when the Georgia sun slanted through the range windows, casting long shadows across the firing line. Sarah worked with Anna Reeves, who'd progressed from struggling recruit to one of the Academy's most promising students. The young woman's stance was solid now, her breathing controlled, her shots consistently grouped. But more than the technical skills, she'd absorbed something deeper from her instructor, the quiet confidence that came from competence without arrogance. As Anna completed her qualification sequence with perfect scores, Sarah noticed other students watching, learning not just from the demonstration, but from the patient, respectful way knowledge was transferred. "Instructor Mitchell," Anna said as she saved her weapon, I'm deploying next month, first combat assignment. Sarah met her students' eyes, seeing the mixture of excitement and fear that every soldier carried before their first real test. Trust your training, Sarah said simply. Help your team. Come home. Everything else is secondary. Anna nodded, understanding that these weren't just words, but distilled wisdom from someone who'd lived them. As the younger woman walked away to rejoin her unit, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. One more warrior prepared, one more chance for a team to come home intact. The camera of memory pulls back from this scene, revealing the broader picture. Dozens of students practicing under the guidance of instructors who'd learned that strength could be quiet, that respect was earned through competence rather than volume. Sarah Mitchell stands among them, no longer hiding, but not seeking spotlight either. Her scarred face catches the afternoon light as she moves to help another struggling student. Patient hands adjusting stance and grip. The Roman numerals on her wrist are visible as she demonstrates proper trigger control. 27 operations distilled into simple movements that might one day save a life. This is her victory, not in recognition or revenge, but in the quiet multiplication of competence, the steady building of warriors who understand that true strength needs no audience. The voiceover concludes with measured words that carry the weight of truth. Honor doesn't require recognition. Strength doesn't need an audience. Sometimes the greatest victories are the ones no one sees, measured not in medals or accolades, but in lives prepared, spirits lifted, and traditions transformed. And sometimes, just sometimes, the quietest among us carry the loudest thunder, not in the noise they make, but in the echoes they leave behind. Sarah Mitchell, widow 27, teacher of basics and keeper of secrets, stands as proof that heroes aren't always the ones who seek the light. Often, they're the ones who illuminate the path for others, one patient lesson at a time. The screen fades to black with simple text dedicated to the quiet warriors among us. Where are you watching from, and what does true honor mean to you here on Graceful Valor Stories?